try to do it from here if I can, and if you can't hear me in the back, just start making noise and I'll migrate to the microphone. Sometimes it's easier for me to stay awake and keep you all awake if I keep my voice up and try to talk to the back of the room without using the mic. So where to begin? Well, let me just say a couple things real quick. I'm going to make a few introductory remarks, give you a little background about sort of why I think maybe I was asked to be here today, and hopefully it's at least somewhat relevant. I want to talk to you a little bit about this community in terms of the support that it gives and is continuing to give the services, all of them, particularly here, the Army and the Air Force. And then I want to talk a little bit about sort of leadership from my perspective as a senior leader in America's Army, and having spent about the last 7 years in what we call the joint role, which is a combination of Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and in fact, in places like Peterson and NORAD, NORTHCON, the Coast Guard as well. So I wouldn't be a seasoned military officer if I didn't have a demonstrator. So in the back of the room is my shipmate back there, Commander Goodall. His call sign was Jane. I changed it to Tarzan because I couldn't have a guy working for me going by Jane. So I changed it, and I checked with Admiral Gordon before I did it to make sure I wasn't violating Navy protocol by changing somebody's call sign, but I did it, and it's working out well. So we're joined here today. So you got an old Army general, you got a young Navy commander, and we're part of what we call a joint team. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through this thing. So just a little background, real quick. This job that I have now is the Chief of Staff for NORAD NORTHCON. I've been here for about 3.5, 4 years. Got here about a week after a week before the Waldo Canyon fire started. So I was here for that. And since then, from a Colorado perspective, I've been involved in not only that event, but obviously the next year we had the Black Forest fire, which is another huge event for us. The floods in Boulder, and other things that have impacted this local community. And then obviously, from a NORAD NORTHCON perspective, it's our responsibility to protect the homelands. In the NORAD, if you will, job jar, you've got Defense of North America all together, so that includes Canada. It doesn't include Mexico, but we have a very close working relationship with Mexico, and very collaborative relationship with Mexico. And then on the NORTHCON side, we have responsibility to sort of what I call clean up on aisle 5. And that's everything that really goes badly. At the end of the day, U.S. Northern Command is responsible to the President of the United States to make sure that we are bringing, to the extent that we're asked, we're bringing military forces in support of civilian organizations. So whether it's something as relatively small as flying helicopters off of Fort Carson to help put out the fire or mitigate damage in Black Forest, or it's pumping out the Battery Tunnel in Lower Manhattan during Sandy, where the President of the United States told General Jacoby, you better help make sure I get the stock exchange up by Monday morning. That's a job jar for U.S. Northern Command. I'm only telling you that to give you a sense of sort of all the collaborative, if you think about that, just think about all the collaborative relationships that we're responsible for maintaining, sustaining, and developing. And whether it's with local law enforcement and the firefighters in this community, or being able to, if necessary, go directly to law enforcement or other parts of the federal government on a bad day, we're responsible for doing that. We do it, and frankly, we're getting better over time. The entire enterprise is getting better over time as we continue to develop, forward, and sustain new working relationships. The other data point I'll give you, then I'm going to sort of go into my spiel here on leadership for a minute. This is the most, and some of you guys have heard me say this before, this is the most challenging intellectual job I've ever had in my multiple years in the United States Army. I shy away from telling people how long I've been in the Army because then they figure out how old I am. I don't like that. So, bottom line is I've been an Army officer for a long time. This is the most intellectually challenging job I've had, and probably the most legally complex environment I've ever worked in. And the fundamental reason is because U.S. Northern Command works where it's really interesting space from a military perspective. And it's the space between national security and civil liberties. And so unlike other military organizations that are out in Afghanistan or Iraq or some other place where they essentially have, so long as they're conducting operations in accordance with the law of armed conflict, they can sort of do whatever they need to do to get the job done. It doesn't work that way in the home. And so we have a completely different relationship with mission partners here. And part of that drives us, although not entirely, part of that drives us to an interesting staff structure. So I've got a NORAD side, I've got a NORTHCON side, I have one commander, but there's a NORTHCON deputy, there's a NORAD deputy, I have a NORTHCON operations shop, I have a NORAD operations shop. All falls under the Office of the Chief of Staff. About 1,680 employees, over which half are civilian. I want to tell you that what I'm talking about here, I don't want you to think it's just about the uniformed services of the United States military. I think most of what we're talking about here really briefly, it has applications to any environment you find yourself in terms of dealing with complexity, ambiguity, in some cases just inertia. One of the biggest challenges I have, frankly, as the Chief of Staff at NORAD is dealing with culture that is important to recognize, but also is in need of change because the future continues to evolve. And so the threats continue to manifest themselves differently. The NORAD responsibilities 30 years ago are completely anachronistic to what our responsibilities are today. And yet to some extent, I still have a culture that on the NORAD side that's kind of sort of still thinking we're back in 1954. And that the Russians still kind of sort of have the capabilities that the Soviets did back in 54. And none of that's true. So part of my job as a leader in this environment is to not only lead change, if you will, but do it in a way that I get buy-in from the team, because only about half the team actually has to legally do what I say. The other half of the team can sort of blow me off and hope that I leave pretty soon. Sooner or later I will leave, but I've been here a long time, so everybody's concerned that I may never leave. So I just tell you that because some of you may find yourself in the same environment I'm in, which is, at the end of the day, leadership is oftentimes essentially getting other people to not only want to do the right thing, but really understand why it is the right thing. And then you have sustained, if you will, you've developed a culture where even when you're gone, or even when you're not present, they're going to do it not because you said to do it, but because they've embraced the challenge, they've embraced the threat, and they've embraced the work. So I just throw that out. Okay, I want to talk real quick, and I've told Tarzan, at the end of this, I want to answer questions if you have them. I don't know if I'm supposed to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I've asked him to sort of wave at me when we get closer to the end of my time, and I can't really remember what that is, but I do want to answer some questions. I want to rip through some stuff real quick, and then hopefully this will stimulate some conversation as well. Before I do it, I want to say this so I don't miss the opportunity at the end. I got to tell you, I've been in the Army a long time. I've lived in a lot of different places, spent about half my career active component, active duty, if you will, about half my career in the Army Reserve. I was raised in New England, lived in the Carolinas for a long time, been deployed to 3 different theaters of operation for different types of combat operations, been in a lot of places. This community, and I say this as a guy who lived in Fort Bragg, North Carolina for a long time, and Fayetteville, North Carolina is unlike any other town in the world. If you haven't been there, you ought to go sometime. Take a weapon. But it's military friendly in the sense that Fayetteville, North Carolina would dry up and go away if Fort Bragg ever shut down. So there is sort of that same, if you will, imperative to not run the military off. But I got to tell you, as a guy who lived in Fayetteville for 5.5 years, there is no comparison between the level of support and interest. And don't quote me on this. Mind tape? Okay. So what I've noticed here, I'm sure things have changed back in Carolina, but what I've noticed here since I got here is there's no community that's more supportive of its military than Colorado Springs and El Paso. And you all have to be commended on that. And you just know how much that is appreciated by senior leadership in the North. And I'm not going to compare you to Fayetteville, because I'm not comparing anybody to Fayetteville. I love Fayetteville. It's awesome. but you guys make us feel great here, and I got the opportunity, and I'm digressing, I don't know, but I guess I'm allowed to. So I got to give a pep talk or a speech or an opening remark one night last summer at the rodeo, and standing up there in the Penrose Stadium, and sun's just starting to go down, and Pikes America's Mountain is there, and I can tell you, what a place. What am I saying? I love Colorado, I love this place, I love your support, I appreciate it. Okay, so let me give you a couple of vignettes real quick, and they're they go way back in time, but they're sort of, I think they're instructive of a couple key things that I sort of picked up along the way as a leader, and hopefully this will resonate with some of you. So a long time ago, a place far away, a place called Bamberg, Germany, I was stationed there as a second lieutenant in the first battalion, second infantry. Fresh out of college, gone through all of the training I was supposed to go through, blah, blah, blah. Show up there, and pretty interesting environment. Within 50 or so kilometers from what was the Czechoslovakian border, which was the Soviet Union, sort of outer up by that, if you will. Pretty interesting mission. We had basically from the time the phone rang, so many minutes to go in, load up our stuff, go out and get to work, and basically the plan was get to what we called general defensive positions, which was sort of where we were going to, if you will, make contact with Soviet regiments that were, in the event this ever happened, sort of rolling into Western Europe. And the plan essentially was for us to use all of the munitions and weapons we had, which in my case would take us about 20 minutes to go through, kill every Soviet tank we could kill. We'd be out of ammo, we'd be dead, and there you go. So we were hoping the Air Force or somebody else would come bail us out, but we never really knew. Anyway, so that's the environment I started in as if you will, young leader in America's Army. So the first lesson, if you're taking a note, I would characterize this under the, I put this in the bin of own it. Walking down, I was a weapons platoon leader. I've been in the Army for about 18 months, maybe a little more. Still second lieutenant, hadn't even made first lieutenant. And weapons platoon in an infantry company consisted of some mortars. And these are all in armored vehicles, 113s. Anybody here been in the Army? Okay, so if you did back time in the Army, you know what a 113 is. It's basically an aluminum can that weighs about 13 tons and is supposed to stop bullets that won't stop. But anyway, it's a good way to get around. It's a track there. So we had several of those, had a couple things called TOWs, which are anti-tank weapon systems, and had a Jeep, which is pretty cool. If you're a lieutenant, you got a Jeep, that's pretty cool. So I had a Jeep. Anyway, so we're walking down to the motor pool. I was with Sergeant Wimberly. Sergeant Wimberly was a sergeant first class, and he was my platoon sergeant. Sergeant Wimberly had been in the Army at that point, somewhere between 12 and 15 years. And I've been in the Army, as I said, about 18 months. So I'm in charge, because I'm the platoon leader, he's the platoon sergeant. We're walking down to the motor pool to check out our vehicles and stuff like that. And Sergeant Wimberly starts complaining to me about lack of support from battalion, which is 2 echelons up. So we're a platoon, and there's company, and there's battalion, and there's brigade, and there's division. Starts complaining about all the people who aren't doing their job to support us. We can't get this piece or this part because so-and-so didn't do this. We can't get this because so-and-so didn't do that. And the guys at battalion don't know what the hell they're talking about. And the guys at brigade are just so far above, echelons above reality that they'll never get a clue. And if the Congress would just do more of this, if the president would do that, and it was just sort of on and on and on, complaining. There's all kinds of Army terms for it, but I'll use that since some people take it. So anyway, so we're about halfway down the motor pool, and I stopped. I said, Sergeant Wimberly, stop. He's like, sir. I said, stop whining. I said, all we have is weapons. That's all I got. I got 45 guys. I've got 6 tracked vehicles and a Jeep. That's what I got. And I'm going to do everything I can to get whatever it is we need to fix this stuff. But at the end of the day, this is our responsibility to fight weapons and make sure the weapons platoon is able to kill as many Soviets as we can possibly kill as fast as we can kill them till we're out of ammo. I mean, that's what I gotta do. So yeah, I'll tell the company commander we need this, or this would be nice to have, but at the end of the day, when I'm out there in the middle of nowhere getting shot at by a bunch of folks, I'm not whining about what I don't have. I got what I got, and I gotta own this. And this is our responsibility. And if the soldiers and weapons platoon ever think that we don't have our stuff together, notice how I again, have our stuff together, we're gone. The morale of this organization depends on those kids believing that at the end of the day, we are going to do our job. We are going to kill a bunch, not myself, a bunch of Soviets, and whatever's going to happen after that's going to happen after that. That's our mission, that's our job, that's what we're doing. And I never, there was never another word spoken. I mean, it wasn't like he came back and apologized, or said, hey, I'm sorry if I was too hard. It was just, that was just, and in that moment, for me, my sense of my responsibility as a leader had changed forever. Because of I've always been relatively confident in my tactical skills, my ability to communicate, my ability to lead soldiers under stressful conditions. But I never really, even as a lieutenant, I never really stood up to an Army non-commissioned officer who'd been in the Army for over a decade more than I had. But technically was responsible and answerable to me. And it's finally got to a place where I'm going to say, I own this. And the implicit message that I was really trying to send to him was, if you want to be a part of this team, I don't need you anymore. Because I got to do it. I own this responsibility to lead these soldiers. So so I just think in terms of, I know I think the theme of this is supposed to be sort of, what did I learn from mistakes that I made? I'm changing a little bit to, ultimately, I think if I had to pick the theme, I'd say it's sort of about resilience. Because I think resilience is really, really important. And owning it is part of resilience. Because it gives you a sense of responsibility and obligation to lead under stressful conditions. And I think that encourages us to remain tenacious and resilient. The next band I'm going to give you is another vignette, a little story. This is about empowerment. This is about bringing a team together and empowering your subordinates. And I think and this is another one of those moments where I had to sort of, this is part of my job. So I was a captain. Flashboard, I'm in Special Forces. Once upon a time, a long time ago, I was, younger, lighter, faster, meaner, rebright. So I'm up in the mountains in northern Norway. This is 1983, and I have a Special Forces team, which you all would call an A-team or an Alpha. So 12 guys, northern Norway, early spring, 1983. And we deployed to Norway, and our mission was, again, this is still when the Soviets were the Soviets, which was, life was much more clear. But anyway, so our mission was in the event of a significant invasion, if you will, of Western Europe by the Soviets. There was an assumption that Norway had already sort of fallen under the Soviet hammer, if you will. And the mission of U.S. Special Forces 10th Group out of Fort Devens, Massachusetts, was to go in and essentially do the sort of same thing that the Jedburgh teams did with the French resistance in the Second World War. If you're not familiar with the Jedburgh, this is a great story to read about sometime. Anyway, so the job was to sort of go in and establish communications link with resistance behind the lines of Norway, back with U.S. NATO forces, and get resupply, and blow up rail lines and the ammo dumps, and do all the cool stuff you see in all the World War II movies. So that's what most of course. So we've been up there for about 3 days. We hadn't linked up yet with the folks we were supposed to train. We were training the Norwegian Empire, which is sort of like their national guard. So we're waiting for the link up, and we've been up there for 3 days. We've been in northern Norway for 3 days. And of all the things you're supposed to do when you're a captain in a special forces unit, the most important thing in terms of being evaluated, since you're usually 3,000 to 5,000 miles from higher headquarters, which is really cool, by the way, if you can work that out. So we're in the middle of nowhere, but the one thing you're supposed to do is once a day, twice a day maybe, shoot back, and this is before we had cell phones and satellite communications and stuff like that. We used a thing called single sideband, and it was a any of you ham operators or something like that, sending Morse code long distances over these old style antennas and radios and stuff like that. So the one thing you're supposed to do is, once a day, it's nice to check back in with headquarters, which was Fort Devens, through a relay in England. And just let them know you're alive, this is where you are, it'd be nice if you send us some more chow sometime, we need ammo, what are our instructions? Well, so I'm thinking all along that everything's cool, because nobody's told me that it hasn't, and we're thousands of miles away from hire, and so that's kind of neat. And so day 3, 2 young soldiers came to see me. I'm sitting in front of I had a little tarp and my little stove and stuff like that. I can't remember what we were doing. And they came to see me and they said, "Hey, sir, we got a problem." And the guys that came to see me, I think this is important. One of them was my communications guy, who was responsible for sending messages. The other was one of my 2 medics. I had 2 medics on that team. Every 8 team has 2 medics. So one of them was a medic. And so we got a problem. And I'm like, "What's the problem?" So, well, we haven't had a successful combo shot, communications, in 3 days. I'm like, "Ooh, okay, and you guys are telling me this now, why?" Well, because it's taken us a couple days to figure out how to tell you. I said, "Okay, so what's the problem?" Well, the problem is we left the coax, that's the coaxial cable that hooks some of this stuff together. We left it back at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Okay, so that's like west of Boston, okay? And I'm north of Tromsø, so, there ain't no FedEx coming to the northern Norway. So they had spent, to cut to the chase, they had spent a couple days trying to figure out, A, how do we tell Captain Luckey, and B, how do we get out of this jam? In other words, what's the solution? What's the fix? And the combo guy had gone to the medic, and these are both kids. When I say kids, we're talking 22 to 24-year-old E5 sergeants. And they had figured out if they could cut the silver dipole antenna, I'll explain that in a second, they could actually make a coaxial cable with Band-Aids and Vaseline jelly and gauze and wires and blah, blah, what have you. Just they have no clue how to do it. So we figured out how to do it, but there's only one problem. What's the problem? I said, well, we got to cut the antenna. And the antenna was this really cool thing. The whole thing would roll up into a box about this big, and it was essentially it was cotton thread that had a silver oxide thing wrapped around the thread. Don't ask me what silver oxide is, but what it does is it essentially turns that string into an antenna. So you can make it whatever wavelength you want. So you can string it across a room, you can put it up in a tree, which is how you do it. But they would literally measure the length of it depending on what frequency they were going to broadcast. That's the only way we could get long-range communications out of that. So the antenna was probably a $2,000 antenna. And they figured out if I would just let them cut a couple feet of it, they could use that to make the coaxial cable. So, do it. That's easy. And so they did, and their concern was, hey, if we destroy a $2,000 antenna, somebody's going to pay for it, we're going to be in trouble, blah, blah, blah. So why did they come? They came to me ultimately because they needed my authority, my authority to, for lack of a better way of putting it, damage Army property to accomplish the mission. So that's a no-brainer, okay? If I can't talk to higher headquarters, eventually, they don't need me. That's not good for my career or for the team, And so they cut the antenna. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is, if you had sat me down with a medical kit and a silver oxide dipole antenna and a book of how to make a coaxial cable out of all that stuff, there's no, I would still be on the side of that mountain. Every somebody here is later trying to figure it out. I'm an English major from the University of Virginia, okay? I don't make antennas, all right, or turn them into coaxial cables. So what I would tell you is, in that moment, I recognized my responsibility wasn't to be the smartest. It wasn't to be the most proficient in every little thing. It wasn't to have subject matter expertise expertise over everything that my medics knew, my commo guys knew, my light weapons people knew, my heavy weapons people knew. You know, it wasn't that. It was to be able to bring the team together and leverage, and harness and leverage all of those capabilities of people that in many cases were much more talented than myself, but I was so in charge. So ultimately it's about empowering other people to play to their best self. And so I've been that under, empower the team. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Last one real quick, because I had to at least tip my hat to, and this goes to both resilience and to what did you learn from, I won't say from failure, but what did you learn from not getting what you thought you were supposed to get? And the brand, I'll talk to you a little bit about virtual business. So, about 4 years ago, I interviewed for a job. Big job, lot of responsibility, responsible for a couple 100,000 soldiers. And I interviewed with the Secretary of the Army. I interviewed the Chief of Staff of the Army and I interviewed the Secretary of the Army. It's about 4 years ago. And long story short, interview with Secretary McHugh. Good interview, I thought. He thought so too, I think, but I didn't get the job. He calls me up. A couple of months after the interview to tell me you're not the guy. And starts off with, I don't know how it works in all of your businesses and your lives, but when somebody like the Secretary of the Army calls you and says, General Luckey, first of all, I feel remiss. I haven't wished you a Happy New Year. You're like, okay, this isn't going. Starting off with a softball. Okay. So it started off with Happy New Year. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Well, you're doing great work. Blah blah. Okay, I got it. Just let's cut to the chase. So bottom line was, I didn't get the job. So 4 months ago, something like that, I'm back in Washington, interviewing for the same job, and different chief of staff of the Army. Interview with him, go in and interview with Secretary McHugh again. And it was actually a wonderful conversation. Because it was sort of a joke between us at this point that it'd taken forever for him to get back to me and tell me I wasn't the guy and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I walk into this office, I hadn't seen him in 3.5 years. And then it sort of starts off, General Luckey, good to see you again. Sir, great to see you, blah, blah, blah. So here's the part I want you to do. In the course of the conversation I had with Secretary of the Army, we had a really, really good, candid conversation about what had happened to both of us since we had the last conversation where he wished me Happy New Year, kicked me in the curb. And I said, Mr. Secretary, I remember vividly the conversation. I remember the tone in your voice. And I know that when you called me to tell me I wasn't the guy, you thought you were sending me off to do something that was less important, less challenging, less vital, less fun, blah, 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 than what you sent me to do. And the other job would involve the promotion and some other stuff. I said, but I gotta tell you. I said, you sent me out there to run NORAD and NORTHCON day in and day out as the Chief of Staff. And you sent me out there 5 days before the Waldo Canyon fire. And between Waldo Canyon and the Black Forest and Sandy, and what I've learned about Russian long-range aviation and 101, 102 low radar processing cruise missiles, and what I've learned about North Korean capabilities, what I've learned about Iranian capabilities, what I've learned about cyber, about what the Russians are doing to us in cyber, what the Chinese are doing to us in cyber, I said, not to mention our fledgling relationship that's better than it's ever been with the Mexican military, and all the challenges we've got on our southern border, and the challenges they have on their southern border. And I just went through sort of this litany of things. I said, I have learned more in the last 3.5 years since you sent me to Colorado. I've learned in 3.5 years of my life put together, period. And I gotta tell you, he got misty-eyed. He got misty-eyed. for an old Army general like me to be able to get a guy like the Secretary of the Army to give Misty Eye, that's kind of fun. And here's what he said. He said, I gotta tell you. He said, we get to a point in our lives where we think that we are, and McHugh's probably 5 years, 10 years, not 10 years older than I am. He was a congressman. I was thinking he said, we get to a point in our lives where we just sort of, our egos get to the point where we just think this is what the organization, the institution knows. You know, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've taken my family here, taken my family there, I've been in combat 3 times, blah, blah, blah. I'm embellishing a little bit, but you get there. And so we get this place where he said, I got to tell you, I've dealt with a lot of Army generals since I've been Secretary of the Army. So most guys in your position, they would have quit. They would have quit. Because they didn't get what they thought they were. They interviewed for a job, they didn't get the job would have been promotion. They were told by the Army, you're not going to get the job, you're not going to get the promotion. And a lot of them would have said, okay, well, I've had a great run, I'm done. He said, you didn't quit. I said, sir, I'm an American soldier. Yeah. Yeah. And so why do I tell you that? I tell you that because I think that conversation and that level of handle with a senior leader like the Secretary of the Army is at the end of the day one of the things that really, really matters in the sense of building trust. And his confidence in me, to this, we'll see whether or not I get the job or not this time. Okay, but he's gone, he's retired, so whatever decision he's made, we'll see how it all plays out. But what I would tell you is, I left that office, regardless of the outcome, I left that office knowing that I had a relationship that was a trust relationship now with the Secretary of the Army, and whether I got the job or not didn't matter. What I was confident of was that at the end of the day, he would make the right decision for America's Army, and he knew who I was. And if I was the right guy, great, so be it. If I'm not the right guy, that's fine. But there was no deception, there was no game. This is just about me telling the Secretary of the Army, this is who I am, this is what I do, and you can play me, or not. But and that I think is that's something that I think over time we learn as leaders. If we stay in the business, is you don't win every day. You don't. So it's what do you do with it, and when you don't win, how do you respond to it? So I just share that with you because it really made an impact on him, and I learned from that how much sometimes senior leaders are reassured when they know that their subordinates, in this case me, are there to play for the team. And we don't quit. We're going to keep playing for the team, regardless of whether or not on any given day the team necessarily appreciates us. I learned as a lieutenant, a buddy of mine was a first lieutenant, told me one day, hey, don't get wrapped around the axle. Axle doesn't even know you're there. Wow. And as an Army officer, I can tell you, Axel doesn't know you're there. I mean, every once in a while, hey, is Luckey still in the Army? Yeah, he's still in the Army. Let's call him up, see if he wants to do another thing. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. Let me go through a couple things. Let me talk about, I sort of talked about this already, but I want to talk a little bit about speed of trust, because I just touched on it with Secretary McHugh, and I know some of you may have been here last year when Joe Jacoby talked. There's a lot of similarities, I think, in some of the themes as far as speed of trust, because that's one of his favorite books is Speed of Trust. I got a couple books on it, I mentioned it. So here's, if you work for me as my deputy, and this isn't new to this job, although this job is a good job. I've got a couple of sort of things I tell you. The first thing I tell you is you do everything that you can do better than me. And that's a lot of stuff. Okay? And this is really just my way of making I know, don't tell anybody. This is my way of making an 06 who's about to have really like the hardest job. 06 is like either a captain in the Navy or a colonel in the Army. Making that colonel think that they got a great job, and in fact, what I'm really doing is just offloading all kinds of stuff that I don't want to do. So I'm empowering them and making them feel good, but at the end of the day, I'm sticking. So the first thing I tell them is, you do everything you can do better than me, and that's a lot of stuff. Then the next thing is, you do everything you can do as well as I can do. And that's a lot of stuff. So now what's left over? Well, there's another category of stuff you do. You do stuff that I could do better than you could do it, but the marginal value isn't worth me doing it. So we're going to suboptimize, and you're going to do it. And I might do it a little bit better, but not enough better that it makes any sense for me to do it. So you get to do that too. So now you got lots of things to do. So what do I do? Couple things. One, I do the stuff that only I can do. And there are a lot of things that only I can do. And some of it has to do with authorities, some of it has to do with rank, some of it has to do with experience, some of it has to do with training, some of it has to do with judgment. A lot of it has to do with relationships. So I spent 3 years on the joint staff before I came out. What does that mean? It means I know a lot of people. Good for me, right? No, it has nothing to do with it. This is about what do I bring to this organization as leader of this team to make other people's lives easier. One thing I do, I can pick up the phone and I can talk to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. I can pick up the phone, I can talk to the Director of Joint Staff. I can pick up the phone and talk to the White House Military Liaison Office. I can pick up the phone and talk to the Secret Service. I can pick up the phone and talk to all kinds of people back in Washington that, frankly, most of my subordinates can't. And it isn't because they aren't generals. It's because they don't know those people, and those people don't know them. You know, and so one day, just as a quick little vignette, and I don't want to burn through too much of my time, but you know, so we have this thing called Operation Noble Eagle. Some of you probably heard of it. Some of you guys have seen demos on it. It's where if we're on a bad day, we stop another 9/11 attack. We shoot down an Airbus with a bunch of people, innocent people. Okay, who has the authority to do that in the United States of America? Me. How about that? Crazy, right? But that's where we are. So we're living in an environment where a two-star Army general living in Cheyenne Mountain or Peterson Air Force Base has the legal authority, without even having to check with the President or Secretary of Defense if I can't get him on the phone. Hey, are you okay with me shooting down an Airbus that's about to fly into the Pentagon? I don't have to ask anybody. I can just order it done. Haven't done it yet. So hope never do it. So we had one, but it happens a lot. We get a lot of calls when the President travels. People don't read that they're not supposed to travel or fly into where the President is. So a couple years ago, President's in New York City. He's doing some sort of engagement at Lincoln Center, New York. And there was what appeared to be what we call a track of interest, an airplane, flying where it shouldn't have flown, right over Manhattan, near where the President is. And so we bring out this conference, a lot of people talking on this phone. Secret Service, FBI, FAA, TSA, NORAD, that would be us, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the Deputy Secretary of Defense at the time, now the Secretary of Defense, gets on the phone. Because his aide had heard this conversation going on and thought, oh my Lord, somebody's about to attack the President of New York, so we need to get the Secretary of Defense on the phone. Because everybody knows one of my rules is if I get somebody who gets paid more than me to make a really hard decision, I'm going to get them to do it. Okay? So I'm looking for something. So Secretary Carter's on the phone, and this goes to the point of things over there. Carter's on the phone, and he's come into the conversation. I can tell from the tone of his voice and from the questions he's asking, somebody told him that we had already declared this airplane hostile and that the President was in New York and this was like a really serious situation. None of which was true. It was true that the President was in New York. The rest of it wasn't true. So I'm able to understand pretty quickly because I know Secretary Carter, key point. He's got the wrong impression of what's going on. He's asking all these questions. Where are the fighters? Where's the President? There's a Secret Service. And that's so funny. I just quieted the net. I said, Mr. Secretary, it's Chick. Ignore it. I said, I'm the assessor. I'm on the call. I think this is bad data. I'm seeing a lot of fluctuation in the radar that we're getting back. But the President's fine. I don't think you need to be on this call, and I don't think you need to be on this. I will call you back if I need your help or when you want me back with you. And he's like, Luckey? I'm like, yes, sir. He goes, I'm going to stay on the call. Blah, blah, blah. And I, sir, okay, but you don't need to. I promise I'll call you back. All right, you sure you got it? Yes, sir. Click. Secretary's off. Everybody else starts breathing again. You know, there was no airplane. It was what we call bad data, bad track. The radars thought they saw something that they didn't see. So I called him back 5 minutes later. we're good, everything's cool, it's what I thought. If I hadn't been there to do that, that conversation could have gotten really stupid really fast and gone in a completely different direction. So that's my job. Nobody else can do that. Okay? And it's not because I'm great. It's not because I'm a two-star general. It's just that I know the Secretary of Defense. So part of this is, as I said, what do? I do things that only I can do. Usually, in addition to the other things, authorities, usually it comes down to relationships. And a combination of relationships experience sort of said, this is something I got to take on. I can't dump this on anybody else. I got to do this. So I neck it down to a small group of things that I do, and everybody else who has the wonderful joy of working with me gets to do all the rest. And they love it. Right, Tarzan? All right. A couple things. I'll rip through these quickly, I promise. I just wrote down a couple things. And some of them are probably not germane to some of the stuff you do, but I think a lot of it does sort of apply. This is about leadership, but it's also just sort of like this sort of style. People who work for me sometimes, who work with me, think I get stuck on details that I shouldn't get stuck on. I don't get stuck on details because I'm into controlling stuff. I'm not an engineer. I get stuck on details when I think that the details are indicators of, for a better way of putting it, discipline. Because there are details that if you get them wrong, people die. So some details really matter. And sometimes, I don't really know exactly how important one detail is over another, so I just tend to pay attention to all of them. And the guys will tell you, if I go down to my command center and there's a flat screen that's on the fritz, my first question is, how long has this been broken? It happened yesterday, 2 days ago. You guys have been down there 2 days ago. I'm down there. What's going on with this? I want the RTAP, which is a remote tactical air picture. It's a feed, if you will. I want it back here. So I'm sure that console's not working. Really? How long has it not been working? 6 weeks. 6 weeks. What's the deal? Well, we don't know. Oh, really? We'll find out. So 2 minutes later, it's down for a part. A part? If you've been down to my command center, okay, all you see are TV screens, computers, and phones. More IT, bandwidth, fiber optic cables, whatever it is, thin client, blah, blah. It's all computer stuff, right? So you're kidding me, right? I'm looking at a screen and you're telling me it's down for parts? I'm looking at a room full of parts. I want one of the parts up here. So that was 2 days ago. Yesterday I go down there, guess what? Oh, it works. How about that? Wow. Hey, Vinegar said, hey, I'm going to come back down here later this week, and if this isn't back up, I'm taking names. Ooh. It's a little thing, but it's not. Because it becomes one of those things where when you walk past a mistake, or if you walk past something with you just set that as the standard. That's the standard. Show a plate. Show a plate. Don't worry if the showers don't work. We have more power outages in Peterson Air Force Base than I have back. Okay, so I'm down. This is a true story. Okay, I'm down in the gym. I'm gonna talk about physical fitness here a little bit. I'm down in the gym. What time am I supposed to stop?
9:25, sir.
9:25. So I'm down in the gym. I finished working out. This is about 2 weeks ago. I'm in the locker room, and in the locker room, Peterson Air Force Base. Once you go in there, it's like a lot of locker rooms, you have to sort of serpentine around so people can't see if the door's open. And you got all these locker rooms, and there's a shower with like 30 shower heads in it. And the surgeon was in the shower, and I'm talking to one of our DH, the Department of Homeland Security liaison guys, and I'm getting dressed. I've gotten out of the shower, thank God. I've gotten out of the shower, I'm half dressed, all of a sudden, lights out. It's blacker than the inside of a cow. There's no emergency lighting, there's no, nothing. I'm literally, I've got my little Fitbit, and I'd be like trying to make it light up, so I can, get out of it. So if you've never been in a basement bathroom, where all of a sudden it goes from fluorescent to, just black, and I'm afraid, wall, you're like, and so anyway, what am I telling you? My first reaction after we get out of there and power comes back is, why do I not have emergency lighting in the latrines downstairs? Oh, sir, you do. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, guess what? We didn't have it today. And, well, there we blah, 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 blah. So they're going to check this one. Every one of the little mercury switches in there, there's supposed to be some sort of ballast, I don't know what this means, but some sort of ballast thing where in the event of emergency, the fluorescent tubes will keep doing something for some period of whatever. All of those, none of them were either loaded or fixed or another excuse as to why they went just black. So it never happened. Okay. Yeah, anybody know what J-Lens is? J-Lens is a tethered aerostat, Aberdeen, Maryland. Long story short, it's huge. It hangs about 10,000 feet above. It's supposed to look over the horizon, and then we're doing a test to see whether or not we can possibly track cruise missiles or something, try to attack the captain. About 2 to 3 months ago, the winds got high and the cable snapped, and it literally dragged 6,280 feet of cable, and cables are not that big. Eventually across most of eastern Pennsylvania, shredding power lines and everything else. And guess who's responsible for all that? So I'm literally talking to the Secretary of Defense on one line, I'm literally talking to a Pennsylvania Highway Patrolman on the other line who's saying, hey, if I shoot this thing, will it explode? And I'm like, I don't think so, but let me call Raytheon before you start shooting. Turns out it doesn't explode. They had a lot of fun shooting that thing down. Man, why am I telling you that? Because I was briefed that the chances of that cable ever snapping and creating any problems were 1 in a million. 1 in a million. Thank you, Raytheon. I'm not picking on Raytheon. I'm just saying Raytheon's only 1 in a million chance, and so that's the world we live in. We live in that 1 in a million world. Details matter. Now I'm not going to get into why some of the things that happened that day, but I can tell you, part of it was lack of attention to detail. People not paying attention to what they should have been paying attention to because they lost the details. So my little note is, since I'm on television, I'll change it, but it's little stuff isn't little. Be on time. Details save lives in combat, and that is true. Complexity. The more senior you get, the more you're managing chaos. You're managing chaos. That may sound like an overstatement. So we'll just say managing a complex environment, an ambiguous environment. How do you manage? You manage primarily leadership. To me, leadership is different than management. I think you probably all agree with that. And leadership is that thing that sort of helps keep everything else together when the environment's really kind of ambiguous, kind of murky. Nobody really knows exactly what's going on, what the challenges are, or where we are. And so leadership is a glue. It's a spine stiffener. We don't have a saying that it's all about leadership, energy, and execution. I believe that. I think leadership's the most important of those three sort of tenets about how you get stuff done. I think leadership's the driver. Energy's huge. Energy's infectious. Enthusiasm, what I call a content multiplier. But at the end of the day, execution is what it's all about. But you don't ever get to step 3 if you don't have the first 2. So we manage chaos with leadership every day. The next thing I would just commend to you is presence. Presence, being there. Where you go, what you do really matters. People notice it. There's an old term I heard, managed by walking around. Frankly, I don't do it as well as I should. Part that's because I do spend a lot of time doing something only I can do. But I try to, the guys call it going rogue. I'll leave the office, I'll walk through the building, and nobody knows, where'd the chief go? And everyone's like, oh God, we gotta find the chief. Because they're frantically calling other offices. The chief may be coming to your office, we don't know. Be God, and here he comes. I do it for two reasons. One, because I need to do it, because it's good, and I'll talk about fitness in a minute. I need to do it just because it's good for me, to relieve stress and keep my head sort of caged and that kind of stuff. But it's also really important for people to see me do it. I worked for a guy in Iraq, a wonderful guy, Army 3-star, lovely, but he would get up in the morning at 4:30 and go for a run. Great run. I could never run. 4:30. So he's back, showered, he's in work, he's all fired up at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and he's ready to go. Well, by 1400, that's 2 p.m. Okay, he's done for the day, first of all. Okay, he's just, you could still talk to him, but he's grouchy, and he's exhausted, and he's been blood on. Literally and figuratively. So I went into him one day and said, hey, sir, why don't you do PT in the middle of the day? Too busy, too much stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, after 1400, you're not really there anyway, so, why don't you get up a little later, take a break in the middle? I said, because the kids need to see you do it. And he's like, nah, the kids see you do it. It's okay. All right, fair enough, So that became sort of one of my things, even in combat, to make sure, or in a combat environment, but in a combat environment, to still be seen by your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines as doing stuff that you talk about. So they know you're not just talking about it, you're doing it. And, oh, by the way, it's really tough for them to say they're too busy to take care of themselves if the busiest guy in the building is taking care of him or herself. So it's about presence, it's about where you are, and the message you're sending, I think, is extraordinarily powerful and always unsaid by presence. Why am I here today? Why? I'm not getting paid, so I don't think I am. I'm here because these subjects, your jobs, this community is really important. And it is worthy of my time to be here with you. There's a lot of other things I could be or should be doing. My boss right now is being eviscerated by the Senate Armed Services Committee. Or maybe not, hopefully not. But he's testifying right now on the Senate Armed Services Committee. My staff back in that building has been working for the last 4 hours and making sure he's getting the last minute information on what's happened in North Korea since last night, what's happened here, how many times have we used unmanned aerial platforms in the homeland to conduct some sort of operation in support of law enforcement or firefighters. So everybody's churning on that stuff. So I can just say, well, this is a really busy day, and the boss is in D.C., and I can be sort of monitoring it tomorrow, making sure that everything's going okay. First of all, he's in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee now, so there's nothing I can do. I'm not passing any more notes to anybody. And second of all, this is every bit as important in terms of what I should be doing today for America. So there I am. So it's present. I don't want to put too fine a point on this. This is the last thing I'm going to say. I think about sort of presence and being approachable. But as I said, I make it a point to work out the building, and I make it a point to be approachable to a fault in terms of how I make myself available in sort of informal ways to people. Tends to drive staffs crazy. If the boss is accessible, what's happening is the chain of command may get jumped because somebody finds me in the locker room or finds me in the gym and has sort of a sidebar conversation with the chief of staff. And they just cut through 5, 6, 7 echelons of command and control to talk to the chief. I've had Army staff sergeants in the building say, Chief, we know you're the only one who can get this done. We need an exercise bike in the gym, or whatever. Okay, got it, noted, And then, of course, then the other thing I'll tell them is, if you want it closed hole, that is classified, that is no fingerprints, you got to tell me. You don't want me to tell anybody who it was that told me, because otherwise I go back and I'll tell my sergeant major, hey, we need to get an exercise bike down there, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, sir, yeah, sergeant so-and-so. And he's like, oh, wait till I get my hands on it. So, sort of, as a leader, you got to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes people don't want you to, burn burn your sources, so I try not to burn my sources. Here's why, in my mind, this is why it really ultimately matters a lot, at least in my business. And I would submit in some cases, every bit as much in your business. Julius Caesar, who I think most of you have studied at some point to some extent, did one really, he did a lot of interesting things. One thing he did that was really kind of intriguing, it was always, as a military leader, always sort of made me wonder, how did that happen? He crossed the Rubicon. And if you remember, one of the rules was, and it was a good rule, was armies couldn't come into Rome. The Praetorian Guard could stay in Rome and basically protect the administration. But Rome's real power, I mean, to the extent from a military perspective, other than wealth, Rome's power was what we call armies in being. Large groups of people, well armed, pretty tough and mean, very well organized, well trained, who were capable of basically conquering most of the known world. So one of the rules, as most of you know, was they weren't allowed to come home into Rome because nobody wanted all those legions running around bored looking for something to do in downtown the capital city. So they weren't allowed to cross the Rubicon to come south of Europe. Caesar decides, for a lot of reasons, I guess, he decided thought they should change the administration in Rome, and he crosses the Rubicon. And all of those soldiers knew what they were doing was not what Roman law authorized or allowed. So the question has always been, so how did Caesar essentially just sort of, how was he able to bring all of those forces, all that power across that river when he knew they were supposed to do it? And the best answer I've ever heard, and I'm not saying this is true, but it sort of rings true, is he slept on the ground. He slept on the ground. Every night in every operation, all of his time out of Rome, the senior leader of the Roman armies in the field slept on the ground. Why? Because that's what his soldiers did. So he didn't have some elaborate bed, like, whatever, later follow-on emperors and stuff like that. Didn't have some, it was a message to his troops that he was warrior and was part of the team. And better in some regards, just because he was Caesar, but in the end, really no better than they. They lived it the way they did. Now, do I commend that to you? No, I'm not saying you got to sleep on the ground or you should cross the Rubicon or anything like that. I'm just saying don't underestimate the power of being a part of the organization that you're in, being perceived as, at the end of the day, fundamentally really being a part of it, not better than it, part of it. And I think there's some power. I got a thing here on judgment. All I'll tell you is that I spend a lot of time every day trying to sort through priorities. What things have to work perfectly? What things can we sub-optimize? What things do we take a lot of risk because they're good things to do, but they're not critical to our mission. I find myself doing that a lot because we're in an age now where budgets are fairly austere, manpower's at a premium. I don't need to tell you all, the cost of human capital is significant, and I'm getting less money every year to pay for human capital for soldiers, sailors, and Marines, and my civilian employees. And so that means I've got to take on new missions, new concerns. Cyber's a big one, frankly. Ballistic missile defense is another one. The degree to which Russian operations and capabilities have increased in terms of their abilities and their proficiency and their frequency over the last 5 years is huge. It's going to create significant challenges for us here. I got to figure out how we get at all of those sort of emerging challenges with fewer people, which means there's some stuff that maybe we were doing 5 years ago, we're just not going to do it. Or if I do it, I had 5 people doing it before, maybe I put 1 person, because I can't invest all that manpower in something that's not my primary or one of my primaries. So I just say risk management is a huge priorities. What do we have to get right? Where can we accept something less? That's another thing I glossed over there. Part of, when I was talking about empowering, part of it is, I don't substitute my, if you're my deputy, I don't substitute my judgment for yours. And I told you before, I'm letting you do something you can't do quite as well as I. Okay? But I let you do it. So I'm not sitting there saying, well, you didn't really do it quite well. No. You decide. You decide. You have the authority to make this decision. Do I think you'd make as good a decision as me? I don't know. Maybe sometimes better, maybe sometimes worse. But what I do know is, if you make a decision that I would not have made, that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means I've given you the authority to make those decisions within that framework. You know you're clear hot. And I'm not going to come back and say, no, you shouldn't have. No. Now, if I don't want you to make the decision because I care enough about this outcome, then I'm not going to let you do it. And say, hey, I got this. I'm not putting you in the spot.
10 minutes, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. 10 minutes till I shut up, or 10 minutes till I'm done. Just don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because by and large, more often than not, I find myself, good enough's good enough. If we try to get to perfection on everything we do, we ain't gonna get anywhere. There's some places where we got no failed missions, but most stuff we can afford a little slippage. Main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. In other words, as a senior leader, you got to focus on a couple of things that really matter and help reminding people. That's the stuff that really matters. People who work for me know, hey, I got this. There's a whole universe. In fact, you come into my office on your first day, and you work for me. I'll draw this huge circle. Okay, that's the universe of stuff that I may or may not care about. Okay, you don't know what I don't care about. Okay, then there's another circle in here. That's the universe of stuff that I care about. Okay, it's inside this. Now, why do I not tell you what I don't care about? Because first of all, I may get it wrong. I may care about this sometime later. So I don't want to demoralize you. But the reality is, my job fundamentally is to make sure the stuff that I really care about, I'm really staying on it. And then there's other stuff out there that somebody else may care about. I mean, people in my building, I don't know about you guys, but people in my building, they care about their parking space. Okay? They care about their parking space. I don't care about their parking space. Okay? And I don't do parking. We need to do furniture down on the J5. I don't care. I don't do furniture. I don't do it. So I tell somebody who I think is really mean, maybe not as mean as me, but pretty close. Okay, you're in charge of furniture. First answer is always no. Okay? Then if they want to negotiate off of no, let them negotiate. In parking, I just don't do parking. All right. Okay. So I took too long. I apologize. So fitness is everything. I talk to soldiers, sailors, and Marines about this all the time. 3 types of fitness. They all matter. Intellectual fitness. That to me is reading, studying, staying current, caring, being involved, being engaged, not just taking all your news from one channel or one cable outlet or whatever, but really being kind of savvy as to what's going on. I talk to young soldiers and sailors and members about this because I tell them, hey, look, you are invested in this. You're a soldier in the United States Army. You're likely to get shot at some point in your young life, so you might want to care about how we're doing, as a civilization, as a culture, You're kind of sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America as all enemies foreign and domestic, We support the American people and their way of life. Okay, so since you may get killed doing it, you might actually care about kind of sort of what you're doing. Who are you supporting? So be engaged. I think that's probably more important than ever for people to pay attention to what's going on and not just go on the internet and click on a few things and think what they got to do. Spiritual fitness. Spiritual fitness to me has nothing to do with believing in any particular religion. I tell soldiers or any military formation, hey, assume that at least 10% of people in whatever formation you got, assume that they are certainly not Christian. They may not even be theists. So you're going to have some agnostics out there, you've got some atheists out there, you got Muslims, you got Jews, you got kinetic Buddhists, You get all kinds of stuff. So don't ever assume that everybody's supposed to believe a certain thing, otherwise, something bad happens. There's no easier way to break down the cohesiveness of the team than to lecture them on what they're supposed to believe. But what I do tell them is, you gotta find something. You gotta find something in your life that connects you with what I regard as that sort of transcendent spirit in this cosmos that gives you a sense inside your heart and in the pit of your stomach, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Today may be my last day. I may die on this mission. I may never come home. I may never see my wife or my kids or whatever ever again. But I'm an American soldier. I'm a warrior member of the team. I took an oath to do this. I'm going to do it. And if today's the last day, so be it. It's going to be okay. And the universe will continue, albeit limping along without me. The universe will continue. Okay, physical fitness. All I'm going to say about it is this. You gotta, we have a crisis in this country. I don't want to oversell it, but pediatricians have told me. First generation of Americans from a health perspective coming along that may not have the life expectancy of people my age. Juvenile diabetes, all kinds of issues with lack of activity, lack of bone density, insufficient calcium intake, all that stuff. And so bottom line is, I'll just tell you this: you got to model it. You gotta help people learn to take care of themselves and encourage them to, if you will, embrace fitness as a culture. Because in my opinion, I tell people, I can't guarantee you will live one day longer. I just can tell you, you're gonna live better. You're gonna live better. And I think as a senior leader, if you can find some sort of level of activity that helps sort of let your mind get zen or whatever in the middle of the day, which is really sort of what I usually try to do, you just sort of relax and get rid of some stress and sort of recage your thinking and then go back and reattack. So, to be honest with you, some of my best thinking probably goes on when I'm out running or on an exercise bike or something like that. So just food for thought. Okay, so Tarzan's told me I'm going to shut up and I apologize for going on. So just a couple things final to close out. First of all, I'd say be the calm. What do I mean by that? I find myself all the time reminding people to include folks in my own home. It's just going to be all right. Politics, you can't, I'm not going to get into politics. I'm a rabid independent. You can't watch some of the stuff that's going on with our home. You got to be kidding me. And so my point is, hey, look, I told Julie last night, hey, we made it to Valley Forge. We made it to Gettysburg. We signed the deal with Appomattox. We made it to Pearl Harbor. We're gonna be all right. But people need, but you gotta, as a leader, that's part of it. It is a complex, tough environment. Okay, a lot of goofy stuff going on. But at the end of the day, we're gonna be all right. We're gonna be all right. Why? Because, if you know what reason, I'm an American soldier. I'm gonna make damn sure we're gonna be all right. It's part of my job. It's the same thing for all you. You're all leaders, right? We're going to be okay. So be the calm. Tenacity rules. Stay tenacious. Stay on. I stole a phrase from the Panthers, who at the end of the day did that well. But I love it. Just keep pounding. Just keep pounding. Just keep pounding. And be tenacious. I spent a year of my life selling equipment to the Iraqis: tanks, helicopters, airplanes. And the motto I adopted fairly quickly, living in that part of the world, trying to do sales without any alcohol involved, which is tough. But we sold $4 billion worth of stuff without alcohol, so I can't imagine what I could have done with it. Patience and tenacity. You gotta be calm and patient, but you gotta be tenacious. You gotta stay with it. So keep pounding. All right, 2 final thoughts, and then so remember, when you get to be a leader and you start to think, you're sort of at the top of some pile somewhere. I encourage folks, and the guys who work with me heard me say this before. I remember remember two old students. Cicero is one. Cicero teaches us, and I've always thought this was cool because it just rings so true. He said, I would much prefer for men to inquire as to why no monument had been erected in my honor than to have them inquire as to why one had. And usually when I tell that to this mid-echelon senior leader, they're like, what? I said, well, think about it this way. Do you want people, when they find out you didn't get that job, to go, oh man, Luckey, he would have been awesome. Ah, I screwed him. Or do you want him to go, if you do get the job, Luckey, that guy? I want the first one, right? Go fishing. Final one. So Virgil. I just love this because I think at the end, this is probably just my philosophy, but it may resonate with you as well. Virgil teaches us, the fates call whom they can. Those whom they cannot, they trap. The fates call whom they can. Those whom they cannot, they trap. Why do I tell you that? Because at the end of the day, I think that sort of goes back to that fitness thing. You know, if you have this sense that you're doing the right thing in the right ways, and you are doing what you've been called to do, then I think that brings a calm, that brings a strength of leadership to the enterprise that I don't think anything can quite replicate. Because the people who are working for you, they trust you, because they know you're in the right place at the right time, you're comfortable where you are, and you're there for them, and you're going to help build the team that gets the job. So, all right, left 2 minutes for questions. Before I take the question, I'll take one. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I appreciate your support to the U.S. military. I appreciate your support to your community, and I appreciate what you do. Hopefully, some of my remarks have resonated with some of you. Others are waiting for the break. I got that. Been out there, but it's been one of the highest honors of my entire military career to serve this community, in this place, and this time with you. So that's it. Take one question. Yeah.
What book is currently on the
Glad you asked. The book that I have just finished, so right now I'm doing the dumbest generation, which I can say, you don't have to read it, I can tell you what it says. It says, we're raising a generation, or generations now, that are essentially being raised by the internet, by computers. And we got kids that are being exposed to iPads when they're 18 months old, and their neural elasticity, whatever it's called, is being wired in a completely different way. And one of the things we got to be really careful about is that we may lose significant capacity when it comes to critical thinking as a culture, as a society. But the book I would commend to, so thanks for that. The book I'd commend to, if you haven't read it, it's really worth reading, is Accidental Superpower. Accidental Superpower. It's about us, and it will make you, I think it'll give you a sense of confidence. When I said we're going to be okay, I mentioned Gettysburg and Appomattox. Read Accidental Superpower. I think it'll help you see America. Two other things I'd commend you to read if you haven't yet. I'm assuming most of you have, if you haven't. They're both, one of them is 2 pages long, one of them is about 4 pages long. One of them is a little piece written probably 100 years ago, maybe less than that, called Brown's Job. Anybody read Brown's Job? Just go on the internet and Google Brown's Job. Okay. Very short piece, page and a half long. It speaks to the reality which is the job doesn't define you. You define the job. You walk into space and nobody else is going to do that job that way. So take the responsibility that's yours and recognize you own it. And that's what Brown's job is. Page and a half. Other one is Message to Garcia. Message to Garcia, that's all about execution. It's about 7 pages long. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. You need to read it. It'll resonate with you. It's all about execution and getting stuff done. And being focused on getting stuff done. And it's about not whining. It's about not asking too many questions. It's about getting stuff done. So I go 3 minutes old. I don't know what to tell you, other than thank you. And hope this was worth your while. It was fun for me to see all of you. So hope I see you again before I pop smoke. I'll let you know if I get another job or not. We'll find out one of these days. But wherever I go, whatever I do after this, this has been the most fun, challenging, cool job